Alright guys, what's up? This is a short little lecture. Could be a lot longer. Someday it probably will be, I don't know, 15 minutes longer or something like that. But okay, let's get down to it. The Depression and the movies. Monsters and gangsters. Yeah, two representative genres. So, okay, as the problems and pressures of the Depression mounted, movie attendance rose. As Gilbert Seldes has observed, the rich could still go to the South Seas islands, the intellectuals went to Mexico, and the poor people went to the movies. The movies became more than ever the dominant form of American cultural expression. And over the course of a year's period, stretching from 1930 to 1931, four horror films would be released that would sum up the darkest hours of the Great Depression and embody, in the words of noted film historian David J. Skal, metaphors of economic and class warfare. Dracula, according to Skal, a sanguinary capitalist, relocates from Transylvania after draining the local peasants. The bourgeois middle-class Dr. Jekyll exploits and destroys a servant woman of the local classes. The physically and mentally disabled individuals of Todd Browning's Freaks live in a literally unbalanced social competition of big people against little people. And the Frankenstein monster is a poignant symbol for an army of abject and abandoned laborers, down to his work clothes and asphalt spreader's boots. 1931 would be America's worst year of the century, but it would be its best year ever for monsters. End quote. The Volstead Act, which had led to the prohibition of the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol in the United States, had also led to the dramatic expansion of organized, as well as not so organized, crime nationwide. While this phenomenon was most prevalent in the larger urban areas, the general air of lawlessness it had bred had been exacerbated by the onset of the Depression and its economic calamities, and this had led to a plague of banditry in the rural regions of the U.S. at the turn of the decade and into the early 1930s. Kidnappings and bank holdups were the order of the day, and the star of the show was John Dillinger, who, after a string of armed robberies across the Midwest, was captured in Tucson, Arizona in January 1934 and sent to the supposedly escape-proof jail of Crown Point, Indiana. A month later, he broke out and made off in the sheriff's car, soon to be pursued by 5,000 lawmen. Unconcerned, he stopped for a haircut, bought a car, and had a chicken dinner with his family in his hometown. Finding he and his gang short on firearms, he raided the police station in Warsaw, Indiana. Guy had a lot of cojones, right? There was not much that state and local law enforcement could do about crooks that crossed and recrossed state lines, as this created jurisdictional issues, because the cops from Illinois could not chase bad guys across state lines into Indiana. Okay, and vice versa. So it made things difficult. So the public called out for federal action. After all, who else could deal with Thompson submachine gun wielding, high-powered automobile driving criminals such as these? The FBI gunned down Dillinger in July 1934, only 2 months after the deaths of the thrill-kill couple Bonnie and Clyde, and soon after, Pretty Boy Floyd and Babyface Nelson were also laid in their graves. By the end of the year, it had become a federal crime to kidnap or to rob a bank insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the public had a new kind of hero, the G-Man, or government man, exemplified by the heroic FBI agent Melvin Purvis and his boss, the director of the Bureau, J. Edgar Hoover. But this was new stuff, because for the past 5 years, Americans had been infatuated not with lawmen, but with the criminal element, making of them folk heroes and champions of the downtrodden. Oh, it's hot. Hang on. Sorry about that. Raw throat. Since the early 1920s and the arrival of the largely unpopular Prohibition, there had been a public fascination with the elements of organized crime that defied the Volstead Act and provided people with the alcoholic beverages that they desired. But after the upheaval of the Great Depression, this sympathy toward the criminal element had become even more pronounced. The rural bandits of the Midwest, specializing in bank robberies, had become almost like Robin Hood figures to a large swath of the American public, taking, as they were, money away from the banks. After all, wasn't it the banks that had ruined all of the good, honest, hard-working folks of the country? This was the unconscious sentiment of the people who read about the latest bank robbery in the newspapers in those days. And even though it was all much more complicated than this, and most folks knew it, nonetheless, this was the way that an awful lot of people saw things. And it was not that they thought that breaking the law was right. And once these bandits began killing too much, their sentiments did indeed turn against them. But still, for quite a while, they admired their boldness, their audacity, the way they stood up to the man, the system, the federal government, to the banks. And when they went to the movies, they liked going to see pictures about men just like these famous real-life bad guys. And so this was when a new genre was born, just as horror had been born as a particular film genre in 1930 to 31, so the gangster picture came into being as a direct result of the Depression. You're probably familiar with The Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire from television, and you probably know such movies as The Godfather, Goodfellas, and Scarface, and an endless number of other ones, but these are some of the most famous, right? You wouldn't have any of that if it were not for Little Caesar, The Public Enemy, and the original Scarface. These films, and many others, were seen by tens of millions of people in the early 1930s. Dozens of gangster pictures were churned out by Hollywood. Over 50, sorry, that's a typo, not fifth. Over 50 gangster pictures came out in 1931 alone. Stop and do the math there, guys. That means that there was basically a gangster movie coming out every single week. Roughly 4 or 5 gangster movies every month in 1931 alone. All the way up to early 1933, you had dozens of gangster movies every single year, okay? 1930, 1931, 1932. And then, blammo, faster than you can say, Mother of Mercy, is this the end of Rico? And that's not going to make any sense to you unless you see Little Caesar, and you should, because it's great. And The Public Enemy is even better. Scarface is great too. They're all great. Well, not every gangster movie, every old gangster movie, but these three are great. Anyway, the gangster picture came to an end. And when I say it came to an end, I mean literally. Literally. The studios stopped making them. The genre was 100% dead in the water. The public had zero interest. No one wanted to see a gangster picture anymore. Because now, in early 1933, everyone wanted to see the exact opposite. A whole new kind of movie, a new genre had emerged. And that genre was the G-Man picture. G standing for government. And that meaning federal government. A G-Man was an agent of the federal government. An FBI agent, usually, almost all the time. But could be anyone, really, as long as they were working in the employ of the government of the United States of America. Wow, sounds heavy, right? Yeah, baby. So what happened here? In early 1933, FDR came into office, and the New Deal got started, and people all of a sudden got hopeful. They began to believe. They began to think that maybe everything was going to be okay, and that the country was going to survive. And so guess what? They didn't want to see movies about bad guys killing cops and beating the system and robbing. And no, they wanted to see the opposite. Movies about good guys beating the bad guys and showing that the system worked. Movies that reinforced their newfound sense of hope, their belief that FDR and the Democrats could rescue the American dream. They wanted optimism, idealism, reassurance, good vibes, not pessimism, cynicism, nihilism, and bad vibes. So just a little insight here into the way that the movies, that most democratic and populist of all art forms, intersected with the problems and pressures of the Great Depression. There are other genres we could talk about and other movies, great movies in particular, like Sullivan's Travels, My Man Godfrey, and Gabriel Over the White House. But no time for that today. Maybe some other time. Couple of things here. Look at these playbills. These are advertisements that were put out in the newspapers by just local movie theaters in this town or that town, okay? Advertising the James Cagney picture, G-Men, okay? I mean, just read, look at the ad copy here. Uncle Sam's fighting agents crash the screen in a blaze of gunfire and glory. Cagney at his romantic best. G-Men hunt kidnapped gang in BC. U.S. officers sent here in search. G-Men gathering here to rub out the last of the mobs. The first story of Uncle Sam's great war on crime, right? I mean, here's the great irony. Cagney, the greatest of the gangster stars. I mean, Cagney was the most iconic of all the mob movie gangster guys. He was the guy every young guy in America imitated. He had a certain kind of walk, a certain way of carrying himself. It was almost like ballet, the way that Cagney walked down the street. And now all of a sudden, Cagney is the ultimate G-man, government agent. I mean, literally overnight, it's like he becomes this complete, it's like he's playing for the other team, right? Here it is. The king of action joins the crime smashers. It might as well have said the king of the gangsters joins the crime smashers. But whatever. You get the general idea, right? Okay. And then over here, you can just read these next couple of things. I'm going to stop talking and just jump a couple pages, and you can pause the video and read this if you like. Just a couple of pages here that you might find of interest, okay? So anyway, thanks, guys, and I'll see you next time.